Ever felt frustrated being told PMS, heavy bleeding, and cramping are just normal parts of life? You are not alone. I loathed my monthly cycle for decades. That all changed when I earned 3 health coaching certifications discovering something incredible. Your period is vital. It is an outward sign of your inner health, and it holds the key to unlocking your full potential. I've been there battling heavy, painful periods, and I turn them into cycles with minimal PMS and cramping. Today, I'm on a mission to share that information with you. Pour a cup of your favorite drink, get comfy, and grab your headphones as we embark on a candid and empowering journey of self-discovery. Together, we'll demystify menstrual cycles, explore cyclical living, delve into natural birth control, and guide parents through those crucial period talks with tweens and teens. It's time to break the taboo around menstruation and embrace the wisdom it holds. I'm your host, Heather Allmendinger, and this is the Embracing Flow podcast. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Embracing Flow. I'd like to introduce our guest today, an expert at Embracing Flow, Bonnie D'Arcangelo. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did excellent.
Wonderful. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I am fabulous. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Listeners, this is why Bonnie is on today. It is going to be such a very, very educational and very grounding and holistic conversation today, because she is a clinical herbalist and holistic health consultant with a master's of science in herbal medicine and is certified in aromatherapist with the National Association of Holistic Aromatherapy. She is the co-founder of Herbal and the founder of Vayusibia Phytotherapy Center. She is the formulator of the Herbal topical products that blend the science and herbal medicine to provide advanced delivery of medicinal herbs. She has helped hundreds of people to live pain-free lives and find relief for what ails them. Bonnie also seeks to give back to nature what she takes and is the founder and president of Michigan's Project 501c3 nonprofit, whose mission is to plant and protect native Michigan medicinal plants that are at risk for extinction. I absolutely love what you are doing, Bonnie. I really do. Before we dive into how you came up with your businesses and the different names, would you be open to sharing kind of your age and your experience around your first menstruation?
Yeah. So I'm going to hopefully remember my age. And I think I was roughly maybe like the summer between middle school and high school. And I remember just being so devastated because every one of my girlfriends had already gotten their menstrual cycle. And I felt like something was wrong with me. You know, I had some friends who were really early bloomers and they were already like C cups and I barely could fill an A cup. And I look at my mom and I'm like, Mom, what's wrong with me? Why am I flat chested? Because you're not. And why haven't I gotten my period? And I remember, like, especially in my 8th grade year, I would keep pads and tampons in my locker so that my friends didn't know that I had not started my menstrual cycle yet, so that I could like hold up this facade that I had. And so I remember being very happy when I finally got my menstrual cycle. I was so excited about it because I just wanted to be like all of my friends.
I love that you did that. You were there and you kind of supported your friends with it, and then kind of secretly in the back being like, okay, when's it my turn? It's like you were looking forward to it. I've had those that are like, I was looking forward to it and then I wasn't, or I didn't want it because I knew what was going to happen, or I was the first one and I had no idea what was going on. So to see kind of the support that I could see, if your friends had were getting their period and they needed something, you were prepared for it, but you were also prepared yourself.
Yeah.
In a weird sort of way, even as a disguise to your friends, but you were prepared yourself for when if it happened at school. So I do love that. You have a very interesting name for your business.
How did that kind of come about in your journey to what you're doing?
Yeah, so I like to name things. It's one of my favorite. Anytime I get to pick out a name for a pet or a kid, I have four children, so they all have very unique, unusual names. And I'll tell you, by the time I got to the fourth one, it actually got really hard to kind of stick with the theme and come up with a new name. And almost all of their names I made up myself, and they came from ancient Greek words. Um, I'm very much into like ancient spiritual traditions, and I love researching all things weird and wonderful and kind of finding our way back to a past when we were very connected to the earth. And so all of the names for my business come from some of these kind of more kind of spiritual traditions of the past. And so the name for my herbal consultation company and my clinical business is Veusabia Phytotherapy Center. I'll start with the easy one. Phytotherapy is the word that is commonly used in Europe to describe herbal medicine. And I liked it because it brought a little bit of the science. And I have a master's of science degree, and I'm starting my doctor of science degree in the fall. And so I very much like the science behind things while I blend it with some more kind of spiritual wisdom. And so that it really kind of described to me this idea of plants helping us in a therapeutic way. And then the word Veusabia comes from the root word eusebia, which is an ancient Greek word that means the sacred awe and reverence of something, usually denoting the sacred awe and reverence for God. But in my use of the word, it's the sacred awe and reverence of the plant medicine that surrounds us and we can use as our healers. And then I'm into astrology as well, and I have a lot of Venusian aspects in my chart. So I added a V in the front of the word for Venus to just kind of bring in that feminine love and beauty to kind of create this all-encompassing idea of this very therapeutic place that was sacred for women and men, but mostly I see a lot of women to come and find their path to heal themselves. And I always tell everybody, I am not a healer and I don't profess to heal anybody. I simply act as a guide to help share with the people that come seeking my help the wisdom and the knowledge that I've learned throughout the course of my life, and to help them on their path of healing, because the only one that can really heal you is yourself. And sometimes we need a guide, sort of like a spiritual teacher or a parent, somebody that kind of helps navigate some of that unknown. And we all can't be experts in everything. And so sometimes we need the knowledge that somebody else has learned in their lifetime to help us on our path.
I I love that. Thank you so much for explaining that. It makes a lot of sense, and I love that you're the guide. You're giving your clients and the rest of us knowledge so that way we can be the healers of our own life. And I'm learning to be the queen of my own life. And my friends have said you're the CEO of your life. So you're just giving us information to be able to do what we need to be that overarching power and having understanding of our bodies and how things work. You have what ails you, and you've used plant medicine. And before we started recording, we were talking about how it's not a one size fits all kind of world. We hear the different ailments and, oh, take this or take that, or you just have to do these sort of things and it'll help, or it'll heal you, or it'll fix you. We are on the same alignment that it's definitely more personalized. Can you explain why it is to be a more individualized approach and how that helps us become more of healers to our own body versus just the one size fits all?
Yeah, I think like the most important thing that I learned along my journey of being an herbalist was the energetics of herbs and the energetics of an individual being. So I really love traditional Chinese medicine for this, more so than Western herbal medicine, because Western herbal medicine, as we do in Western society, we subscribe certain things that an herb is good for. And we don't really understand that, other than we base it on science, that a plant has certain constituents and these constituents are shown to do something in a laboratory and blah blah blah. But if that's the case, and we'll take the herb I love, especially for women, black cohosh. So if black cohosh is supposed to do XYZ, why does it only work for a small percentage of women? And that's because it comes down to the personal energetics. So, and when we say energetics, you know, herbs have, we'll narrow it down to 4 basic qualities. They're either hot or cold, or moistening or drying. And of course, there's shades of gray in between all of those, because nothing's black or white. Understanding those energetics of those herbs are really important, because somebody could have a heat deficiency happening in their body and they would need a warming herb, or they could have a really cold and damp condition, and we need to kind of move them more towards homeostasis, so we would use more warming and drying herbs. And so with an herb like black cohosh, it is a very cooling herb that clears heat in the body and does what we call releasing the exterior. So this is where it's said to help with night sweats, right? Because this is this exterior sweating. So it actually pushes that heat away from the body. But what it does is it raises the yang in the body. So in TCM, we use yin and yang to describe herbs. And so yin is typically more cooling and yang is more warming. And so because it has this influence on the body, if you are already cold and damp, and you could have night sweats and be cold and damp, or you could have night sweats and be hot and dry. The night sweats are a manifestation of dis-ease within the body. And it doesn't mean that everybody who has night sweats came about that dis-ease in the same pathway. So you can actually do damage to your body by taking an herb that isn't appropriate for your constitution. And so this is where the black cohosh may be shown in clinical studies to be really effective, but on a personal level, it doesn't. And this is what's interesting about herbs. When you have just a very small, narrow window of people using them, the likelihood of finding those idiosyncratic, occurrences is very, very slim. You have to have a wide usage of something to really start to see all those little idiosyncratic things happening. And so this is where I'm always really passionate about trying to help women understand that it's not about walking into a store and pulling something off a shelf that you read on Google is helpful for your condition. It is actually really important that, just like you wouldn't take a pharmaceutical drug without consulting with your physician, herbal medicine is the same thing. It is a medicine, and that you need to consult with somebody who is well trained in the energetics and understanding of herbs, so that they can formulate something that is specific for you. And maybe black cohosh is a small part of that formula, but if you don't meet the energetics of black cohosh, and I think it would be useful for you for, say, instance, night sweats, I'm going to create a formula that is going to balance out those very cold energetics of that herb, so that I don't make you too cold. And so that's where formulation comes into play. And 99.9999%, actually, I could say 100% of the time, you would never walk out of my office with just one herb, because herbs need other herbs to support them in their work inside of the body that they're going to do with you. And so herbs are put together in a formula that meets the varying needs. And I love to kind of describe this concept of menopause having this set of circumstances, but women get to that point of disharmony in the body through lots of different paths. Somebody may have those hormonal imbalances, but somebody could have a liver dysfunction or a kidney dysfunction, and that is throwing the energetics of their body off. And so when somebody comes into my door, say for menopausal help, I'm going to look at some of the underlying functions of the body. I'm going to treat these exterior symptoms, but I may look at them and say, you really have some kidney dysfunction going on. And by supporting optimal health of your kidney function, that's going to help for that proper fluid balance within the body that is going to reduce those night sweats or those hot flashes, because your body is going to have a better balance of that system. And so everybody is different, because another woman could have some dysfunction with her liver where it is not processing and clearing out the hormones at a healthy rate. And so she could have some stagnation in the liver. And in order to clear that heat from the body, we have to address that. And so this is where herbal medicine becomes very kind of intricate. And it's very different than like a physician who can be trained to say this drug is for this or that. It's really an art form in which you have to have a deeper relationship and understanding with the plants in order to understand how to help support somebody on that journey.
It's making a lot of sense, because from what I'm hearing is those two individuals that you talked about, they could have the same symptoms. They could be experiencing the hot sweat, the night sweats, and everything else, and they can come to list the symptoms are exactly the same. But because of what's going on inside of their body with the different temperatures and the different dryness and moisture, they would need individualized formulas, because what you gave to person A won't work for person B.
They may have a couple of the same herbs in their formula because those herbs are very supportive of that certain condition in life. But like again, there's going to be other herbs in there that are, tailor fit for that person to help support their overall body function. And this is where like herbs are very different than pharmaceuticals. A pharmaceutical drug is masking a set of symptoms. It's actually not working to heal and correct the body. And this is like where I also try and like really differentiate between herbs and pharmaceuticals. That pharmaceutical is masking symptoms. So you're taking it for arteriosclerosis, right? It is stopping you from having, your clogged arteries. It's masking. It's not healing the underlying cause of it in the body. And so when it comes to herbal medicine, yes, we are going to deal with the immediate pertinence of somebody's condition, but we are also going to look for the underlying cause of that manifestation. And for instance, two women could come into my office with PCOS. And so, yes, there is an underlying general reason why women get PCOS, and typically it is an insulin resistance, diet-based insulin resistance, kind of leading to this condition and this manifestation in the body. But how did they end up with that insulin resistance? And it's not always just diet. Like sometimes it's underlying function of the body. And so my job in our initial consultation is to start to unravel those reasons why you've gotten to that disease, or I like to call it dis-ease within the body, because I don't treat disease. I don't treat a medical diagnosis or a medical condition. I am looking at a person, and it becomes very, very personal in that. That's why I say I'm a holistic health consultant. I'm consulting with you. I never want to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. We in my office, we have a conversation, and I'm trained in motivational interviewing, which is a different way of approaching that consultation. Instead of me saying, take this pill, do this at this such and such time of day, I'm going to say to you, well, what do you think you can do to help improve your health? What are some ideas you have? What are some things that you would like to do? Because when it comes from within and that person becomes their own healer, it suddenly is a change you want to make, versus if you're told to do something, you're not as likely to do it as if it came from yourself. Like, well, what do you think? Because I truly believe that within everybody is the answers they need to heal themselves and to find their own pathway. Sometimes we just need somebody to help bring that out of us. It's like a little seed that maybe is buried a little too deep in the earth, and it needs some sunlight shining on it so that it can sprout. Some seeds need total darkness to germinate. Other seeds have to see the light of the sun in order to germinate. And so what I like to think of myself is helping push that seed up to the surface so it can see the light of day and can open up and sprout on its own. And eventually you're going to leave my services and go on your own, and you're going to have knowledge and wisdom that you didn't have before. And in the future, you're going to be able to make these decisions for yourself based upon, what you've learned through that experience. And so I like to think of it as an experience. You're not here paying me to listen to what I have to say. You're here to find your own path and to have somebody who has knowledge about the plants. I have to have understanding of the energetics of a wide range of plants for a large number of people. So that's what I think is really important for women. If there's one thing they take away from today is understanding that it's not one size fit all, that one plant that some woman says is really, really good and helps them could actually be damaging to your body. And that's where you do need to consult with somebody, because I wouldn't try and build a home without consulting with an architect. It's the same thing.
Yeah. No, and I love that, and I see it time and time again. Take this supplement, it helped me. Take this supplement, it helped me. Not knowing what's all in that supplement, and is it going to help me, or is it going to make my symptoms worse? And even over time, what helped me even 6 months or a year ago has changed. And so just understanding, okay, it may work here, but that doesn't mean it's going to work later on in life. You brought up insulin resistance, and I know a big one, instead of going on metformin, which is a big insulin drug, pharmaceutical, is berberine.
Yep.
And I hear different people talking about berberine. And I know I deal with insulin resistance, not because I've gotten my A1C checked or my blood sugars are kind of maybe a little higher than what they should be, but I had gestational diabetes. So I know if I don't watch, I have a higher chance of having diabetes within 10 years of delivering, and my son's 8, almost 9. So I'm like, okay, Heather, and I'm noticing perimenopause issues. But I keep seeing berberine popping up, and I'm scratching my head like, is that really something you need? And I know that there are other individuals that have probably heard of this as well.
Yeah, so berberine is a very important plant constituent. And so this gets into the topic of synergism of whole plants versus plant extracts of a single constituent of a plant. And so berberine can be very helpful, but not by itself. If you just take a berberine extract, your success with it is going to be very limited. So if I'm going to give a client of mine berberine, I like standardized extracts in only a few instances. When it comes to milk thistle for liver support, absolutely. It has to be a standardized extract, but I want that standardized extract to also include the whole herb, because there are other parts of that herb that are important synergistic aspects of what makes it work. Now, we have realized that certain things like berberine in a higher quantity have benefits, for instance, well, for a wide range, berberine for cardiovascular disease, digestive disorders. I mean, you name it, you could throw berberine at anything. But then you also have to look at, like, there's so many different plants that contain berberine, and which plant also offers a synergistic effect. So if I'm having digestive issues and I'm going to use berberine, I'm going to want that combined with the whole plant extract of golden seal, because that's the berberine containing plant that's going to be most effective for those digestive issues. And this can go on and on and on in many different ways with each of the berberine containing plants that are used to extract that constituent. So I'm a huge fan of whole plant extracts, sometimes with standardized content of certain constituents, because there's other things that are in that plant that are really important to have as well. And so berberine can be an important part of your wellness journey, but it is not going to be the only thing. And I always like to describe it as having a best friend. When you're by yourself and you're out and about, like, okay, you can have a good time, enjoy a museum, go to a movie. But when you're with your best friend, how much more fun do you have when you're with your best friend? Sometimes you'll laugh so hard that your cheeks hurt and you pee your pants. I've had 4 kids, so let's be real. That's just
Yeah.
part of life as
Yep.
an older woman who's had 4 children. I'm just, I'm going to sneeze and cross my legs. It doesn't matter how many
Right there
Kegels I
with you.
do. Sorry,
Right there with you.
that's life. Um, but it's the same with herbs. And so there's something in traditional Chinese medicine called Dui Yaos, and they're herb pairs that have been shown both historically and scientifically that when they're paired together, they are stronger than when they're alone. And there's actually Dewey Yaos that are when a plant is very toxic. If it's combined with another plant, for instance, like licorice has the ability to inhibit the toxicity of other plants. And so, especially in traditional Chinese medicine, they will use licorice in combination with some more toxic plants like aconite, which actually isn't a plant, but aconite is one of the commonly used traditional Chinese medicines that's more toxic. And so the pairing of those reduces toxicity. Licorice is one of those dewy yaos that's used with a lot of herbs because it actually can improve the absorption and the use of other herbs. So I always like to talk about herbs as best friends, and a valerian root is another really popular herb for women in menopausal that is said to help with sleep. But valerian has a dewy yao. That skullcap is its best friend. And so a lot of women will say, well, the valerian didn't help me with my sleep or this and that. And I said, well, did you pair it with some skullcap? Well, try pairing it with the skullcap. And then let me know if you find it to be more effective. And 9 times out of 10, it is more effective. But that other 1 out of 10 is because sometimes there's underlying emotional issues that are really inhibiting somebody from finding their optimal health. And so I always share an example of one of my clients that I had been working with for some time, and she had a number of serious medical problems. She was a breast cancer survivor, she had diabetes, and a number of other things that we were working on, and we were making a lot of headway supporting her. Her goal was to be off of pharmaceuticals. And I told her from the beginning, I said, that's going to be a long-term goal. You're on a lot of pharmaceuticals right now, and we have to work towards the total health of your body and transitioning. We can't just stop the pharmaceuticals and think that you're going to take an herb tomorrow and it's going to be all better. And that's where herbs are different than pharmaceuticals. They're not like we like an instant answer in our modern age. Herbs work to restore the body. And you didn't end up in your condition in 1 hour, and you're not going to restore your health in 1 hour. And so herbs have to be taken for longer periods of time so that they can have their influence on the body to help restore it to total health. And so with this client, we had been working together for some time, and she was having sleep issues and menopausal issues. And I thought that I had really good formulas for her, and she was doing better, but we always just seemed to be missing the mark just slightly. And it wasn't until she opened up to me and told me the real root cause of the issue, and that was because one of her children had committed suicide. And it was this sudden moment of, now I know what is going on. And now I know the herb for you, because it's not about the symptoms. It's about the emotional underlying root cause that has become systemic and has led to disease after disease after disease, because you're not a disease. There's dis-ease within your body where it is struggling with guilt and a whole number of other emotions. And until we resolve those underlying emotions, there really can't be any true healing. And so that's the difference between having a really good herbal consultant who is having a different type of relationship with you. Those are the kinds of things that eventually we do need to open up to with the people who are working as, I'll use the word healers, because we're helping to heal in some form. Because as long as we hold on to those deep emotional traumas, the reason for the disease is always going to be there. And we may see that disease manifested in kidney disease, but the real problem is something else. And so to all those listening, if you do seek out an herbalist or health consultant, find somebody that you feel comfortable opening up to those. Maybe even goes all the way back to your first menstrual cycle and some trauma surrounding that period of your life, or what happened. I was in a relationship with somebody for several years who he was a single dad, and he had two daughters, and their mom was completely out of the picture. And he recanted to me his own trauma about the first time they had their menstrual cycle, and was like, well, what do I do? And so there's that experience too. Maybe you didn't have your mom to support you on your journey. And so those are the things that can lead to those diseases within the body that we title all kinds of phrases like amenorrhea or hot flashes, and they all have something. I believe that we as human beings are not just a physical body, but we are deeply, deeply spiritual in whatever manner we want to describe that as. And if we don't address both the physical and the spiritual, we're never really working towards healing the duality in our own selves.
You have brought up so many amazing points. I love that you're using dis-ease in the body instead of disease, because there are symptoms of that dis-ease. There's something going on, and to hit that emotion, our emotions trigger different things. And if we ignore them, it changes and it grows and it manifests into bigger things. I also love that you brought up with dads, and which is why I love talking to dads, are the providers of daughters that the mother figure's missing in some way, shape, or form for whatever reason. To make that conversation a little bit more open. And with teenagers and with those that are just starting menarche, we briefly talked off camera about and how to kind of work through that a little bit, and how to stay kind of away from more the ibuprofen, because the damage that the ibuprofen can actually do, it's touched upon in different circles, but it's mostly widely known to just help take pain away, but we don't know the side effects of it or the damage it could potentially and probably be doing to our body. So would you be open to sharing a little bit of that?
Yeah, and so I will just say, like, the information about NSAIDs, which is what ibuprofen is, an NSAID. It's a certain class of over-the-counter medication. If you go to just like WebMD or look at the National Institute of Health, at the research and the warnings and precautions about NSAIDs, it very clearly states that it can cause ulcers and damage. And what it does is it slowly damages the mucosal lining of the digestive tract, which is this very fragile kind of jelly-like substance that lines our digestive tract. And this is where like the beneficial bacteria lives in our body. It is also where bad bacteria like H. pylori can lodge itself in the digestive tract. And so it's really important to think about it was like this concept of, we are this kind of universe within our human body. You are not just this one being that's thinking and living in this physical form. You are an entire universe. There are billions of living entities within you. Even the cells that make up your body are have their own individual consciousness. They're living entities separate from you that make up you. And so we have to think about our health is not just our own health, which is the final outcome of the health of all of these living cells and organisms within us. And so NSAIDs can be very damaging to that mucosal layer and have other precautions that people should know. I feel like we have this thought for a large amount of the population is that like, oh, well, I can buy it, over the counter, it has to be safe. Oh, that's actually not true. There's a lot of studies that, and a lot of reports that if Tylenol had applied for FDA approval today, if it didn't exist and they applied for FDA approval for an over-the-counter drug, that they would get denied. And so there's a lot of evidence to substantiate why these are really not healthy, and especially not healthy for us to be taking on a regular basis. So we talked a little bit about like PMS, and that a lot of women, especially when they're younger and even into their older age, but a lot of young people, especially when they just start menarche, experience a lot of PMS systems as their body works out that hormonal balance. And I have a teenage daughter, she's now 16. And so I've been through all of this, and it's comical because you would think like growing up in my house, she'd be very into herbs and this and that, but no, she wants to be like all her other friends. And so she always says to me, Mom, I was at my grandma's house and I had my period and she gave me ibuprofen and it made my pain just go away. Why can't you give me ibuprofen? So, well, we don't have it in our house, so sorry. I said, well, you know, because I want you to be healthy, and I understand the reasoning behind this. And she says, well, those herbal teas you give me, they're very bitter tasting. And I said, well, the bitterness of the herb is actually really important. So there's 5 different tastes to herbs. There's bitter, there's sweet, there's acrid, there's pungent, and they all do different things. And so part of the energetics we mentioned before were these like the heat symptoms of an herb, but there's also the taste of an herb. And so a sweet herb is really nourishing to the body, versus a pungent herb is very moving. So like if you have blood stagnation, you're going to want to give your client pungent herbs because it's going to move the blood. Now, if my client takes this pungent herb and then takes it home and adds honey to it, it's changed the energetics of that herb. It's no longer pungent. It's now sweet. And so it's nourishing. And so it's going to act upon the body differently than it would have if they had just taken that pungent herb. And so my TCM teacher always jokes, because he spent a lot of time over in China, and he says they joke about Americans because here in America, we may put 10 grams of an herb in somebody's cup of tea. But over in China, they're going to put 30 grams of that herb in somebody's tea because they know if it's not bitter and pungent and I don't feel that on my tongue, that herb is not going to work. And you have to have that taste because it triggers certain reactions, chemical reactions within the body. For instance, people with digestive issues, we use a lot of bitter herbs because the bitter herbs trigger the production of hydrochloric acid and saliva within the body. And so if somebody's having a lot of digestive issues, I will give them a bitter herb to take before they eat their meal because it is going to kick those processes into high gear in their body. And so that's another really good takeaway. Like your herbs, if you're taking them for a medicinal purpose, don't put honey or sugar or sweeteners in them. Take that cup of tea, and I do this with women, like with their PMS symptoms too. Like sit with it. If you're having menstrual cramps, instead of trying to go about your really, really busy day, sit back and try and feel and move your mind into your uterus. And I did this in my last menstrual cycle. I was having a little bit more PMS cramps than I normally do. And so I sat back and I was in a hot shower to kind of help relieve some of this pain. And I was thinking about what is it that in life that I'm shedding right now and moving beyond, because that's what's happening. You're shedding and moving beyond something. And so I always try and think about like what am I shedding and what am I moving beyond, and center myself in my uterus and try and understand what it is struggling to shed. What is it struggling to move beyond so that then it can make way for the new? And if you can learn the practice of meditation with your menstrual cramps, you will find that they start to move a lot easier. And after about 15-20 minutes in the warm shower meditating on this, I got up and I went about my day and I didn't have any more cramping pain. Of course, I've worked on this for many, many years. And so it's not an overnight success story. Like I did this once and it was phenomenal. And you may experience that, especially if you're really good at meditating and you're very into tuning into your body. But we need to get more into that tuning into our own body and trying to understand its experiences and recognize that, well, we may think of ourselves as this whole person because we see and conceive of ourselves. We're actually lots of individual parts. Our uterus is its own organ. Our stomach is our own organ. And I find this one, I'll share something that I find fascinating. And I jokingly say that the real brain in our body is not our brain, that it's actually our stomach. And this is because of this really interesting thing. So the stomach is the only organ in the body that can ignore signals from the brain. It is also the only organ in the body that when it sends a signal to the brain cannot ignore it. The brain must do what the stomach says to do, and the stomach does not have to do what the brain says to do. And when I learned that, it just was so fascinating to me. And I was like, maybe the brain isn't the real brain in our body. And this is really important too, because in a more kind of psycho-spiritual level, we say that we must digest our emotions, and that a lot of the root causes of stomach ailments actually come because you haven't digested your emotions. And so particularly with constipation, what is it that you're unable to move through your system? And when we think about the concept of the stomach being a brain in and of itself, that we work on our mental health and processing our mental emotions, but how often have we digested our emotions and allowed them to move through our system? And if you think about like even like the more Eastern concepts of like your chakra systems, how many chakra systems are located from your heart to your floor? Far more than the one chakra in your head, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so much more energetically that's taking place, you know, in this space of our waistline. And that's a whole nother concept right there of our waistline. And as women, we tend to hate our waistline so much. And I'm always trying to impress this idea on my mom, because she's 65 now, roughly. She might be 66, roughly 65 years old. And she's constantly trying to lose weight. And she's within, could use maybe lose 10 pounds and be within a healthy normal weight range for her body. And I've tried to help her understand that as women age, our body naturally holds on to more fat, because fat is the only place in the body that our bodies can store estrogen. And as our production of estrogen starts to decrease, the body looks for a place to be able to store that estrogen so that it can have reserves. And so some of the most common places for the body to store estrogen is on the sides of our hips, which is actually a very healthy place to store estrogen. It's one of the healthiest. So if you have those side pockets on your hips, like I do, that I'm always like, oh, I just wish they would go away. Actually, be thankful for them. Like, thank your hips that they are holding on to estrogen for you. And there is some evidence that shows that people who are chronically underweight will suffer from more PMS symptoms and more menopausal symptoms than women who have like a healthy balance of weight and fat. So don't hate your waistline. Love your waistline and appreciate the things that it does offer to you. Now, of course, if you're living an unhealthy diet and lifestyle, there's like, different things, but I never want anyone to hate their body. I want you to love your body, because we store that energy of hate within ourselves. And if you think about, yourself back to this concept of being this living organism with living things inside of you, if you are constantly telling those things inside of you that are trying to support you and keep you alive that you hate them, what is eventually going to happen to them? It's like a child whose parents are mistreating it and telling it they hate it and you're useless and you're no good and you're never going to amount to anything. That child's never going to amount to anything. And it's the same as the cells in our body, because our cells are constantly renewing themselves. They're like babies. Every 7 years, the cells in your body have completely turned over. And so how are you treating those little babies within yourself? And so there's so many things to just consider in this idea of nurturing oneself as this concept of you as your own little universe.
I'm you can see me sitting here and nodding in agreement through this whole thing. Oh my goodness. It is so true, and so many things have brought clarity and just synergy with what you're sharing and what both of us are doing in our lives to help others. This has been a lot of information. I know that we could have an entire class on this. and what you teach and what you've discussed here. Where are people, listeners, able to find more about you, more about what you're able to provide as a consultant, as a counselor to clients, and just in general?
Yeah, I've been really working lately to try and make more of this accessible to my clients and build out a YouTube channel and other things. And it's a work in progress. I'm very, very busy person. I got 4 kids. You know, the youngest one is almost 2 years old. So they definitely kept me busy. I have everything from teenagers to babies, and a couple businesses and a nonprofit that I run. So I'm working to build out more accessibility to some of this information, which is why I've been doing more podcasts lately, because it gives an easy opportunity for me to reach people without having to do the back end of the work. I get to come and talk, and I don't have to worry about like producing it. So I do on my main website is bonniediarcangelo.com without the apostrophe in my name. And on there, you will find links to everything, including a link to the podcast appearances that I'm on. And some of them are focused on herbalism, and then some of them are focused on my topical care product. And then some of them go way out there into some concepts that may not be palatable for everybody. So read the description on them and choose the one that meets your level. If you really want, how far out. And I do believe like one of them I titled that this is for those who are into the weird and wonderful, because different hosts that I'm a guest on their show want to talk about different subject matters, and so they'll pick my brain on things that I know that are more in those kind of weird and wonderful realms. And then there are some shows that I'm on that are just strictly about herbal medicine. So you can find me there, you can reach out to me there, and then keep an eye on my link for my podcast appearances so you can see and listen to shows that I'm on. And then, of course, there is my holistic health consultation service, Veyu Sabia. I will say that if you want to meet with me on a one-to-one basis, I am scheduling a couple months out in advance at this point in time. So it's one of those things where you'd have to reserve your spot in advance. And then once I do accept you as a client, you have more regular access to me. It's just our initial intake is a several-hour appointment, and so it takes a little bit more time to get in for an initial intake.
Understand that one, because you are getting to know your client and the emotions and everything that kind of goes in. You explained what you kind of need in order to really help them learn how to heal themselves.
Yeah.
Before we go, you have given us so many nuggets, but is there any additional wise words of wisdom you would like for us to take with us before we say goodbye for the episode?
Yeah. There's one thing that I always like to share. You are your own healer. And as a woman, you are connected to the wisdom of the cosmos. Like, I'm not that much into modern Christianity, but I definitely believe in a lot of the tenets of it. And if you read the Bible, wisdom is a woman. She's an actual being, a living being who wanders the streets trying to share her wisdom with her people. And as a woman, you are connected to wisdom. And if you ask her to be in your life and to guide you and to support you and to walk with you, she will be more than happy to walk by your side. And I could do nothing and know nothing that I know unless I had encountered wisdom at one point in my life. And it was this book by, oh gosh, I think the book's name was Sophia, Goddess of Wisdom. Unfortunately, it's in my bookshelf in my living room, not down here on my shelf. And I think the author's name was Caitlin Matthews, but the book title had the word Sophia because that's the name of wisdom. And that was my path to meeting wisdom for the first time and recognizing her as this living goddess who could assist me in my journey in life. And so in my parting words, each and every one of you can become intimately connected to wisdom and have her as your personal guide throughout your life.
Those are amazing words of wisdom to end on. I will look up that book and make sure that it is in the show notes. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for taking us on this enlightening journey into herbalism and why what ails us is not always a one size fits all solution, that we are individuals, our body is its own individual, unique makeup, and that we need that individual care to help us learn to heal ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you for the time to be here.
You are welcome. The links that Bonnie shared can be found in the show notes. Thank you so much, listeners, for spending your time with us today. If you found a nugget of wisdom or a moment of empowerment, our mission is accomplished. Do you know someone who could benefit from this information? Please share Embracing Flow with them. And until next time, listeners, love hard, laugh often, and as always, be vividous. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, submit a rating and review, and share it with your friends. Visit my website, embracingflowpodcast.com, to receive your free guide on 4 ways to decrease PMS. The link is in the show notes. Information shared on the Embracing Flow podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. Until next time, love hard, laugh often, and always be vividous.